But if you need to ask questions, you want to ask any questions, feel free to do so through the GoToWebinar toolbar, and we'll address those questions as we go. And we also have a session at the end, period at the end, to capture any questions that we don't address during the presentation. As I said, I'm Brian Hodson at Oz Development. I've been here a couple years. It's great to see a number of familiar names on the webinar. So today we're going to just step through a few things, a bit of background on Oz and some new solutions at a high level, and then we're going to drill into shipping and in the warehouse and some new capabilities we have, and we have a lot of customer scenarios that will outline where these capabilities are in use. Also joining me is Troy. Troy, you just want to say a few words?
Hi everyone, this is Troy Graham, and thank you for joining us today. And as Brian said, certainly feel free through the chat section to ask any questions along the way or as we wrap up at the end of the hour, but thank you for joining us.
So just as a background on the company, Oz Development's been around since 2002. We're privately held. We have over 10,000 customers, over 500 of those jointly with NetSuite. And we've been working with NetSuite since 2006. We were one of the inaugural partners in the SDN program, and really built that relationship out and a lot of success jointly with customers who have many on the phone here today. So really work very well with the NetSuite team. Some of the customers as examples along here in the bottom, for example, Lionel NASCAR. They evolved and started with shipping with us. Really with some basic UPS shipping and added some USPS, and then expanded as they integrated Lionel in the NASCAR race car business, added some mobile capabilities, advanced ship notices, and more recently have integrated Channel Advisor in with NetSuite using OzLINK. So, and that's a fairly sort of typical sort of customer adoption. May start with something maybe even basic shipping. We have a solution that just simply pulls the orders out of NetSuite and to the Carahsoft and writes it back, and then adds on capabilities, and we'll talk about a number of those today.
Yeah, I think one of the things, Brian, that to me sort of stands out as I step back and kind of look at this list is there's really companies in lots of different verticals, which I think you'd expect, but also lots of different types of companies and different size companies. You mentioned the Lionel example where, on a busy day they're shipping thousands of orders, where you might have a more specialty company like a Sailrite in the sort of nautical equipment business. But what we find is that each of these companies have specific requirements that we can help to automate and really just drive bottom line savings. And it's it's not just number of packages out the door that sometimes drive some of the automation that we can provide. There are companies of all different sizes, and some that you wouldn't necessarily expect, like Free Flow Wines is an example I know we're going to talk about, but kind of a unique company. You wouldn't necessarily think of a big shipping company, but in reality they very much are a logistics-based company.
I mean, the other theme that I see across, really, I see it more in our NetSuite customer base, is the sort of the innovation and the growth of those customers. I mean, Troy mentioned Free Flow Wines. A few years ago, they started out with really revolutionizing how to deliver wines out to customers in kegs, and now they're running, managing 35,000 kegs and keeping track of those assets through their customers and their suppliers through the wineries, all with NetSuite and OzLINK. So really sort of fundamentally changing how that supply chain works and growing dramatically as a result with everything sort of in that cloud built around NetSuite. Just in terms of what Oz does in NetSuite, today's focus will really drill in on that right shipping. I talked about earlier, integrating the shipping process in with NetSuite fulfillment. We also have a number of extensions in the warehouse, and that might be things like desktop receiving. We also have a mobile barcode scanning solution that's pretty successful and growing quite a bit in the NetSuite space. And then more recently, integration extensions to e-commerce, so being able to pull orders in from things like Channel Advisor, Magento, and push data out from NetSuite. That might be item master information, inventory information, those sort of things. But today we're really going to focus on the shipping side. So a little bit more detail on a few more customers as an example. And this is a mix of sort of NetSuite and other customers. Royal Oak Peanuts is an example. They basically have a Magento front end. We pull those orders into their ERP system. But prior to that, that was a manual process. They then process those right out of the ERP into their shipping system, and then dynamically we update that information back out both to the ERP and the Magento front end, and really drive a lot of efficiency, cut down on errors, and provide visibility and better customer service for them.
One of the other ones that I think about on that e-commerce side, Brian, is like a Rock Bottom Golf. They sell golf equipment, golf accessories, that sort of thing. And one of the challenges they were facing as they do more business through eBay and Amazon and different channels was actually fraud. And so they wanted to create some business rules as part of their integration into NetSuite that set certain orders as pending approval versus an approved sales order. So it may look at things like a destination shipping address or order value or characteristics like that, and as opposed to having somebody come in and spend the day looking at every single order and saying, yep, we can approve this one, or this one's a higher fraud risk, have that be automated as part of the integration to NetSuite on the back-end ERP side. So I thought they were kind of a unique example that I think in today's world of companies selling across more channels, more e-commerce business, having some ability to streamline some alerts or some awareness around some potentially fraudulent orders is a great use case here as well.
And IBEX, they have come on board using NetSuite a couple of years ago, and also use our mobile solution, but also with shipping. Started out with processing that shipping. They have really a couple channels. They have a consumer channel, which peaks later in the year, and a more wholesale channel providing. They provide wool outdoor sort of apparel, a high-end outdoor apparel made of wool. And so their earlier peak season is to large retailers, people like REI, those sort of stores, and that shipping process happens finishing up now, and then for the holiday season it peaks with the consumer. So that pick, pack, ship process ends up being pretty different for each of those channels, and then following on with things like advanced ship notice, ASNs, compliant labels for some of those retailers, expanding the solution to include those things.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Brian, earlier free flow a little bit, but I think free flow wines is sort of an interesting example within the warehouse because they're shipping essentially containers, these metal kegs, but those are actually their assets. Those are the things that are their products. So for them, these metal containers not only will go outbound to a distributor and then ultimately to like a restaurant as their consumer, but these kegs actually will come back into their facility, and they have to go through a process of being cleaned and sanitized and then ultimately refilled. So they were really looking to streamline the process, and because the container itself is really their core asset, having an understanding of where those assets are and if they're back in their own primary facility, what status they're in, was a great use of some mobile technology to really give them visibility of where are their assets, are they in use, and are they making money for the company now, and having that visibility directly inside their NetSuite system.
And another customer I'll talk about here is Ovation Hair, and they moved to NetSuite prior to implementing OzLINK. What they were doing is they're producing the pick tickets in the front office, going and doing those items, producing the shipping labels back in the warehouse. Now matching those up became an issue in terms of getting the packages that were packed mixed up with the wrong labels, so they ended up with a number of picking and fulfillment shipping errors, which becomes costly, impacts customer satisfaction. Customers may not come back and buy again. So in that scenario, what we did is we created a combo pick ticket with a shipping label on the bottom. They can do that in batches in the warehouse and also produce that with the right batch size based on the labor available and how busy they are to do those pickings. So they could do a batch of 25 or 50 or what have you. And because the pick ticket and the shipping label are one document on an 8.5 by 11, they eliminated really any of those shipping errors, fulfillment errors that are a result of getting those things mixed up.
Hey, Brian, a question came in through the chat as you were talking about Ovation Hair, where somebody had said that they were considering doing a sort of pre-pick type of shipping process, so producing the shipping labels in the front office. And the question is, when does the order get marked as shipped, and how do I know the order actually made it out the door? And I thought I'd just touch on that one for a little bit, since I was involved on Ovation's side. There's a couple of choices there. One of the choices is we can mark the order shipped when you print the label before the customer or before the user out in the warehouse ever goes to pick anything. And some people get concerned because what happens if I get into the warehouse and the item's not there, or I don't want to send my ship notice off to my customer because I haven't actually given UPS or FedEx or whomever my package. So there is an option to mark the order as shipped when you print the label, but we've also, for some companies, marked the order as either picked or packed in that type of a batch process, and then had a separate process at the end of the warehouse where somebody scans that carrier tracking number just to verify that the package actually got out the back end of the warehouse. So, if you have a batch-based process and you're thinking about, do I lose some control and some visibility of what made it out the door, that may be one option to consider kind of in response to that question.
So things we see in terms of across the customers, things that are driving that complexity back into shipping, with all of the marketplaces and e-commerce growth out there, that clearly is driving different business processes back in the warehouse. So that might be, drop shipping on behalf of a large retailer, might be your own e-commerce site, might be shipping things in to Amazon for FBA. It really is driving a whole new set of processes that are going to create complexities in the warehouse. Might be producing a pack slip, that JCPenney example. They need a branded pack slip. All of those, as the complexities on the e-commerce side increase and the growth, it adds decisions and work potentially on the backside. And really the goal would be to automate as much of that as possible based on the attributes of the order, the attribute of the channel that it's coming in on, maybe the customer. All those attributes and fields can be incorporated into that process. And then, of course, customer demands in terms of visibility. And that might be a consumer who wants to know when something was sent, when it's delivered. Could be a retail customer that requires certain labeling, advanced ship notice. But those aren't, Amazon sort of driving expectations for the whole industry that, all the other, shippers need to, and companies are trying to fulfill and match.
And two other examples, Brian, there around that third point of delivery date options. This time of year we have lots of things where, my shipment needs to be there by December 24th, for example. So starting to enable some business rules that can look and say, based on my ship date, what's the least cost service to get the package there? Can I ship it ground? Do I need to ship it 3-day or 2-day or next day? And I can downgrade service levels as well as upgrade service levels. Maybe you've got a promotion with your website. If you're spending more than a certain dollar amount, we guarantee delivery by a certain date. We can look at time and transit information real time and automatically upgrade a service level. It's something we start to see a lot of business rules that get enabled inside of the shipping departments and the warehouses this time of year. So delivery dates can be get it there in time, as well as what's the least cost option to get it there within the time commitment for your customer.
Yeah, and visibility. I mean, one example, working with a customer, they do fulfillment of point of sale posters and those sort of things for their customers, the retail chain, and they're producing these printed materials and shipping them out to the stores. So one of the things that they looked at was being able to track that shipment as it's, never mind that it's been shipped, because one of the problems was they were getting shipped out, but the stores necessarily weren't putting up the promotional materials in as timely a fashion as the chain wanted, in conjunction maybe with some media ads and those sort of things. So in addition to a notification of being shipped, being able to track it and then notify the recipient in an email, hey, your package has arrived, with a reminder. So those sort of things, value-added communication visibility, can improve the whole overall business process. And then finally, in terms of leveraging the cloud, so being able to get rapid payback, also implement things as we call it sort of an agile way, starting with the most painful pain point. That might be the visibility issue I just talked about. It might be something as simple as a shipping error where the wrong services are getting used or not used, those sort of things, and knock that down, and then address the next pain point once you get some payback and solve that initial issue. That's certainly with a lot of our customers. They'll start with, hey, basic shipping, add on, let's say, maybe some branded pack slips if they're shipping on behalf of a retailer, then add maybe advanced ship notice. So being able to do that incrementally without a big, huge IT project minimizes the risk and proves the payback before we have to make that next level of investment. So we've talked at a high level about the various solutions for around NetSuite, and the top few are really around the mobile solutions, so being able to do mobile wireless picking, inventory and cycle count visibility, receiving and put away, and that can be either with the mobile or sort of desktop receiving, and depending on the receiving process and the type of goods you guys are receiving, each of those, one of those will be more applicable, producing labels maybe as things are coming in the door to provide barcode scanning and better visibility to inventory as it flows through the warehouse. E-commerce connected, we've talked about that, and then also being able to connect with fulfillment partners. We have, and this could be a customer who's maybe, or a supplier who's drop shipping on your behalf. And we have a specific capability around this, but one of our customers, a lot of their goods get drop shipped. So they basically want to get visibility. They create a fulfillment in NetSuite. They want to get visibility to those shipments. So again, doing that sort of proactive tracking, pulling that information back into NetSuite so that they know when their customer got delivered, even though they never really handled the goods. So again, just better visibility control for sort of a broader supply chain. And then today, shipping, we'll drill in now a lot more detail on some of the shipping capabilities and some of the new things. Some additional customers, I don't want to highlight any specific ones here. The Solar Biz is an interesting one. They do solar equipment for the solar industry, and they, again, not a huge volume shipper. Started out with what we call OzLINK Pro, and that basically is a fairly straightforward solution. Simply pulls the order down into from NetSuite into WorldShip. They process the shipment and write the tracking and the costs back in. So again, that's a good example of someone starting out with probably the most basic integration and shipping solution we have in the NetSuite space.
Yeah, and another example, Brian, that I would sort of look at here would be a company like Team 22. They sell lacrosse equipment, and they're selling into large retailers. So they've got certain requirements from those retailers where they might need to generate like an ASN label for companies that they're doing business with via EDI. And those retailers are going to have some very specific requirements based on who they are. Dick's Sporting Goods, as an example. So they're to me, a good example of a customer-driven demand of, I need an ASN label, as as one example. Another one that is sort of interesting to me is a company called Mudhole Tackle. And if anybody's into fishing a lot, these guys sell a tremendous amount of fishing equipment, supplies, lures, and at first I didn't know sort of how many people are buying those things online, and this is a company that's been growing year after year after year with NetSuite, and they've got some rules within their shipping department based on insurance, based on where their customers are located that they want to have automated. So as that business grows, and somebody that may have been in the warehouse 2 or 3 years ago that really cared about the business and was really paying attention to all these business rules, that person is now managing a team. They're able to bring in temporary staff and some people that maybe aren't as in tune with the business, but put those people to work and help grow or support the growth of the business with higher volumes of orders without necessarily driving lots of expensive employees back in the warehouse. So they're kind of a smaller operation, but one that's growing, and they really need to keep costs in check, but they didn't want to lose some of that hands-on customer service that they had for some of their shipping rules with things like insurance, third-party billing, etc.
So when we're speaking to NetSuite customers, a lot of customers may come to us based on their shipping requirements. They may end up, NetSuite has native shipping, which certainly provides your core UPS, FedEx, USPS. What we sort of articulate is, as the complexity increases, your volumes grow, there's some advanced capabilities that we have. So, and we really look at that in 3 categories. There's business rules being able to automate, as Troy talked about. Maybe based on the value of the package, you want to turn insurance or proof of delivery on where it's going to. Maybe a particular customer requires that you ship with a particular carrier and service. All those sort of business rules can be automated. And then the middle section in terms of broad carrier support. So being able to support regional carrier like OnTrack, or in Canada Purolator, or Canada Post. Some of the special services of the major carriers. So UPS has a SurePost, which is targeted at residential delivery if you're doing e-commerce to U.S. residences. FedEx has something SmartPost. So being able to leverage those capabilities within NetSuite become important. Or simple things like a scale are some of that things.
Well, and one example, Brian, around the scale ideas, we had a customer that they sell a lot of kitchen accessories, bathroom accessories, faucets and sinks and those sorts of things. And a lot of the products they'll buy, like a faucet, might come into their warehouse in a box of 2. Well, when an end consumer buys it, the consumer is typically buying a single, not 2 of these faucets or 4 of the faucets. I forget exactly the example that was given to me. But the thing that they found out was they had inventory discrepancies. And come to find out, there were situations where a consumer would come in and order one of these faucets, and the person in the warehouse would pick this box, which essentially was a small case that had 2 or 3 or 4 faucets in it. So using the scale, what they enabled was a weight verification. So if somebody got to the point of printing a UPS label, and we expected the box to weigh 4 pounds, and all of a sudden that box weighs 12 pounds, well, let's stop that user. Let's give them a warning message. Let's let them know that we've got a potential mistake. And come to find out, within the first week, they found like a dozen or 15 shipments where they were getting ready to ship a quantity that was incorrect. It was more than what the end consumer had ordered. And most customers, if they ordered 1 faucet and they got 2, they weren't calling and returning the 1. They were putting it on eBay or Craigslist or something and not returning that. So there's a big inventory savings through something which, at its surface seems pretty simple of having a scale integrated into the shipping process.
And then the last area of advanced shipping is really around servicing all the channels and really keeping it as automated and streamlined as possible without the person at the ship station having to decide or remember, for this particular customer, JCPenney produced this pack slip, or we need a compliant label, or run back to the front office to complete the ASN, those are things. Really trying to have as consistent as possible process across the order fulfillment and the shipping, and have the system determine what outputs, what documents need to get produced.
Well, and I always think back, Brian, to an example. I went into, a number of years ago, into a facility that was part of General Motors. And they had, they were shipping to dealers, they were shipping parts to end consumers. They had a large variety of different types of orders and customers they dealt with, and they had a routing guide that was in their warehouse, and it was, I don't know, 25 pages filled with different business rules of, based on value and what type of customer it was, and we looked in the warehouse, and the routing guide was being used to prop up the back of a keyboard on the shipping computer. And so we asked the guy about it, and they all sort of laughed, and they said, yeah, we get these corporate routing guides once a year or something. And he's like, nobody's ever going to remember all these business rules. You don't have time to go through this document and find out, did my shipment qualify for one of these business rules? And as a result, these rules that made a lot of sense to General Motors were being largely ignored. And I think that's sort of an extreme example to have 20 or 25 pages of a routing guide. But a lot of companies we talk with do have, if it's international, I have a carrier preference, or based on value, I want to require insurance, or include a return services label. So I think they're on a smaller scale. We find a lot of companies that we work with that are growing have a few of these business rules that we're really dependent on somebody out in the warehouse to remember in order to make sure they get followed through. And hopefully these examples here are good ones for the folks on the phone as things to think about are, am I relying too heavily on the staff to make the right choices for it?
And then this just provides a quick summary of capabilities between sort of native and OzLINK. We actually have examples of each of these in the following slides, so I won't go through each line item. A couple of ones I might mention here. So returns, we have a customer, Lumen's Lighting, that uses it returns. They get an RMA. They provide goods, their products come from about 20 to 25 different manufacturers, and a fair number. When a return happens, their process is fairly complex to determine, does it come back to them? Does it go to the manufacturer? Those are the things. So they were doing it manually. Once we automated the RMA process with producing that return label in their warehouse, it focused in one area as opposed to being split between the warehouse and the front office where they were also taking in that RMA. But it also cut down the actual manual effort from about 2 hours to about 10, 15 minutes and provided much better visibility to the warehouse of what goods, what things were coming in versus not. So that's an example. But let's just drill into some other of those line items in detail. So pre-ship address validation. So before releasing those orders to the warehouse for printing label, being able to do a batch process, looking at the orders that have come in, and more commonly this is with e-commerce orders where those addresses might be shipping to someone the first time, or they're not in the system prior to that order as opposed to B2B, and being able to go through in an automated way and flag against an address database, are these valid addresses, to eliminate at a minimum some surcharges that the carriers impose. But worst case, it's the wrong address and the customer never gets it, and then they're very disappointed, and again, they may not come back. So the way this works is OzLINK basically just goes through those, set up the orders for pending fulfillment or pending approval. OzLINK goes through those in a batch fashion, flags which ones are valid, which ones are ambiguous, and then you can go back through and clean up the ambiguous ones and have those released to the warehouse. Again, providing a much more streamlined process, cutting down on actual hard costs of correction fees, as well as much more improved customer satisfaction. They get the goods. And then the other one is the advanced business rules. So we've talked about this a number of times. It's through here, the examples of item value, proof of delivery. There may be things around a particular customer, loyalty. So what gets written back on the invoice for shipping may change based on that particular customer. So providing loyalty programs and tying into with some marketing can also be a good benefit. In terms of the extended supply chain and partner fulfillment. There's really two scenarios we're covering here. One is where the NetSuite, you as a NetSuite user are drop shipping on behalf of a customer and getting that in, providing, again, there could be some branded pack slips, those other things, maybe providing visibility, an ASN to that retailer. If you're drop shipping to a consumer, probably don't need a compliant label. You're not shipping it into their warehouse, but direct to the end consumer and providing that process and that visibility. So that's one scenario. The scenario on the right is the supplier fulfillment, the example I gave earlier where you're taking orders in, not carrying the inventory, having a supplier fulfill that, and that can be a notification to the supplier, also providing the visibility to track both the delivery of that from a tracking standpoint, but also costing, being able to go out and find out what the cost of that shipment was so that you can get that back in NetSuite either for accounting purposes or billing purposes.
Yeah, I think that's a really common one where, maybe my 3PL is doing my shipping for me, but it takes me, days or a week to figure out what was the actual cost to get that shipment off to my customer so I can track my overall cost of sale. So I think that's a great example, and it's certainly a model that we see growing more and more frequently over the past, past 12 months or so.
This one is a more recent scenario where our customer is a supplier in what's called Groupon Goods, which is a new initiative, Groupon marketplace basically, and they're driving to compete with the Amazon, eBays of the world by providing a set of suppliers who provide the goods. They don't manage the inventory in this scenario, but they basically provide a portal to get those orders, and what OzLINK can do is pull those orders down. Now in this scenario, and with Groupon, typically it's a customer might be doing, let's say, 100, 200 orders a day normally, whereas they run a Groupon event, and now they have an additional maybe 100 or 200 orders to fulfill in a fairly tight time frame. Groupon vendor guide says the orders have to be out by the end of the following day. Now, this lends itself well to a batch process, primarily because they're typically providing those, it's a Groupon event on one customer's doing headphones. So it's the same item, SKU, maybe different colors, but the weight's the same, so they know ahead of time, that you can produce that label ahead of time. And what we do here is run through that batch process. You can see on the right a Groupon-approved branded pack slip based on their vendor guide with the shipping label on the bottom. And then the other sort of efficiency on top of that is being able to sort those pack slips. If there are different colors, different spots in the warehouse, sort them by SKU so that you can the fulfillment in the warehouse is optimized to really get those goods out the door.
And I think one of the things we hear from companies with Groupon is, like you said, Brian, those spikes in sales are great, but as soon as that sale starts to impact my customer service to my other orders, knowing that I've got a lower margin on the Groupon order, it becomes really challenging. So if we have a special situation like a Groupon, or even through a partner where maybe you're doing a fulfillment on behalf of somebody else, having the ability to take a sort of a unique order characteristic like a source of Groupon and being able to automate those to get them out the door quickly and reduce the cost of that fulfillment and not have it significantly impact your day-to-day operations. I think it's a great example of how we can automate something based on a specific channel for NetSuite users.
Yeah. And then a couple different pick scenarios, pick pack scenarios. So potentially we talked about the batch processing on the left here, producing a combo, and that can be branded with your branding. This example is obviously with Oz. On the right, more master pick, so picking multiple orders, producing that master pick ticket. Again, just trying to drive some more efficiencies a little upstream from shipping in the warehouse.
And that master pick list, I think, is really common. If we've got lots of business-to-consumer type orders that got one or two items, and I want to just produce a picking list by bin, for example. So I've got 30 orders I need to pick. I want a list that shows me here are all the items across those 30 orders, and gives me the bins to go to, so I can have an intelligent sort of path through the warehouse is something that we hear from a lot of companies are really looking for, and not an easy thing to get done natively outside of the NetSuite platform.
Yeah. And here's a couple of examples. Customer shipping on behalf of 2 large retailers, and just not making sure that it's not the person at the ship station who has to sort of remember and do this. Producing these pack slips automatically based on that customer number in NetSuite. Again, just focusing that person on productivity, getting the shipments out the door, getting the right pack slip with that right order processed. This is a newer capability we've implemented in a number of customers, and it really looks at the carrier time in transit to optimize the right level of service. And there's a couple of different scenarios that we use this with. On the left is cost savings. So something might be marked to go 2-day air, those sort of things, whereas that shipment time, based on time in transit, there's an opportunity to potentially downgrade that service and save on the shipping cost. And do that. So depending on the mix of service levels, that can contribute quite hundreds of dollars of savings in transportation without impacting the customer service. On the right side is really the flip side of that coin. Maybe there's customers who require a delivery, a date that might be into a retail store. They can't get it past a certain date, or it could be a service part, maybe coordinated with a technician. And there's maybe penalties if that date is missed, or the delivery date. As that order is processed in the warehouse, maybe there was delays, and now it was originally marked to go ground. Now it really needs to be upgraded to next day air, those sort of things. And the incremental cost of the shipping, avoids any higher penalties for a late delivery or those sort of things. So those are a couple of scenarios to automate and streamline. Make sure you're picking what's the right service level for this particular shipment.
So here's sort of a quick example or quick map of some of the complexities that can come into play when you are doing business with some large retailers, for example, like you'll see on the left side of the screen here, that might be requiring an ASN. And this is a pretty detailed and complex workflow. The main sort of component that we bring into the mix here is if you have customers like Best Buy and Dick's and Wayfair and these other companies that are requiring an ASN label, traditionally what ends up happening is the person out in the warehouse packs up the boxes and they mark up a sheet of paper and they indicate what goes into the box, and they bring that sheet of paper back into the front office, and somebody logs into the SPS Commerce web portal, for example, to print off their ASN labels. And to do that, they basically have to retype in all of the information about what's in what box. And what we're going to do in this scenario is help, as the person is packing the boxes, keep track of what they're packing, and then communicate with SPS Commerce to automatically generate those ASN labels. So as opposed to a process that is very manual and typically being done by a higher paid employee in your office, we can sort of shift the packing of that ASN shipment out into the warehouse, give the warehouse staff the labeling they need as they're labeling the boxes, so they don't have to go back and manually match those up with the shipping labels, and make all that information available inside of SPS Commerce. Any of you that are doing business with a large organization via EDI, I'm sure you've received a phone call about a chargeback that says, hey, you packed the box wrong, or you were missing something in the box. Well, historically, the cost to go evaluate that and try to prove, and even to have visibility to try to know what your team thinks you packed in those boxes, outweighs the chargeback. And the retailers oftentimes get that money for the chargeback, where if you receive that phone call or that notification, and you can instantly look in NetSuite and say, no, I packed that item in box number 3 of 20, and you have that sort of visibility, it makes it much, much harder for that retailer to come come after you for chargebacks for having your boxes packed incorrectly or labeled incorrectly, because you've got that information right at your fingertips directly inside of NetSuite to see down to the package level what's in every single box. So something that, again, is very time-consuming, very, very manual generally, we can help to automate and get those ASNs produced, out the door, and compliant with your big trading partners.
And then the last sort of topic before we jump into a demo is we talked about a couple of use cases around hands-free tracking, being able to know, where that shipment is. Once you've got it now out the door, knowing where is it, has it been delivered, and that can be a couple scenarios. One customer of ours, it's for their own shipments, but they wanted to be able to track, know when it was delivered, and then trigger a suite script in NetSuite and send a text back out to that consumer. Your delivery has arrived. So that's one scenario. The second scenario, which we see, is with the drop ships, a supplier who's doing that shipping on your behalf, where again you get that, you want the visibility obviously to the cost and those are things if that's something billing, but now this provides ability to know within NetSuite has that shipment been received by the customer, similar to Troy's example where now if that person phones in right in NetSuite, in your customer service team, they can look in and say, no, it was last tracked at this point, even though in that scenario you never really managed that inventory or shipped the item out.
Yeah, another example there, Brian, and I think is a services company. We've got a customer, they have parts that they'll ship out for repair for equipment, and then a service technician gets dispatched. So one of the things they wanted to do is, before this service technician heads out in the morning, let's look at all the orders for that technician and find out, are the parts delivered yet? Because if the parts haven't been delivered, we don't want to send the service technician out there. It's expensive. And then we've got to try to reschedule that service technician for the following day, and it becomes very, very inefficient. But if that person, before they hit the road in the morning, can see, I've got 12 stops today, and the parts for all 12 stops have been delivered, then they know they can have a complete kind of day, and their schedule can flow kind of as they would hope it would, and not be getting to each location and saying, well, I hope my package is there, I hope my parts are there, or having somebody call and spend lots of time. So that automated tracking for them was really a huge, huge time saver. So, Brian, as you said, we're going to jump out and do a quick demonstration of OzLINK, and there's a few different things that I want to show everybody today as we do the demonstration. But one of the key sort of things that I think about when we talk about automation and improving efficiency and improving accuracy is we need to be able to do that in a pretty simple manner. And I look at it and say, I want to make the process for fulfilling an order or tracking a group of orders like we were just talking about as simple as possible. And to me, simple is, I click a button or press a function key on a keyboard or something like that. And that's really kind of what the OzLINK demonstrations are focused on. It's like, let's make it as easy as possible for somebody that is new into the business or a temporary employee in the business or, again, somebody that's just maybe not caring about the business as much as I do, to allow them to be effective for me. So here inside of NetSuite, I'm on a fulfillment, and the demonstration that I have is just processing a single shipment right now. But the idea is I've got my item fulfillment, I've marked the items that I'm going to fulfill, and I have this little OzLINK toolbar. And if I want to just ship this package with UPS, all I need to do is click the UPS button in the OzLINK toolbar, and OzLINK's going to send the shipment details over to, in this case, because it's a UPS shipment, over to UPS WorldShip. Now, as that information is passed over, all of those different business rules that we've been talking about can be applied. I can be looking at service level and making a decision. I can be looking at my sales channel and say, hey, you know what, my customer requires his PO number in reference field 1 versus reference number 2. I may want to set the billing, the shipping charges to bill to my account based on the value of this order or to do a third-party billing. That weight verification. In this case, my weight's within tolerance, so I can go ahead and ship it. But all of the decision making is going to happen. So if I'm the person in the warehouse, I put the box on the scale, I hit process shipment, my label prints, and I really have no idea of all of the decisions that can be made on my behalf. I'm just thinking, put the box on the scale and print the label for me. A couple of things to look at in this, or at this fulfillment after it's been shipped is, you'll see things like automatically marking the order as shipped inside of NetSuite. Things like you'd expect, the packages have been populated. In this case, we shipped one box, it weighed 9 pounds, and here's my UPS tracking number. A couple of things that you know, sometimes we may not expect. For example, are shipping costs. Down here on my OzLINK tab, you'll notice I've got 3 shipping cost fields. We have the ability to, let's say I'm buying something through your e-commerce site and you've got a free shipping promotion. Well, maybe I want to keep track of and be able to analyze, what did I bill my customer for shipping? What was my actual shipping cost? And what was the published shipping cost from that particular shipping carrier? And all of that information, because OzLINK's going to put it right into NetSuite, can roll up into some very, very simple reports in my NetSuite account. And I just want to show a quick example of one here, because this allows me to start to do a few things. It allows me to look at my transportation spend and start to see, where am I making and losing money. And this is one report, and this is broken down by customer. But what it's showing me is my order number, the fulfillment record ID, the carrier, the weight, the published UPS cost, my actual UPS cost, and here I'm using a demonstration account, so the actual cost is the same. I don't have a discounted rate in there. And then in this particular case, we billed my customer what my actual cost was. But there may be situations where we look at, like this transaction up above, where, you know, we billed my customer $24.45 for shipping, but come to find out, for some reason or another, my actual shipping cost was $143. And this is something where, you know, it may not be the person in the warehouse that's really looking at this information, but it might be a CFO or somebody in the operations team that really wants to analyze, am I making money, am I losing money out in my shipping department? Also, it's a great tool. One of the reports that's in here is sort of broken down by carrier. You know, so you may say, hey, I'm getting ready to negotiate my contract with UPS or FedEx, and I want to be able to look and see, what did I spend with that carrier last year, and what type of shipments did I process, what weights, what zip codes did I ship to? All of that information is in the item fulfillment. So we give you a couple of sample reports to start with, but they can, because they're NetSuite reports, they can very easily be customized and configured to meet your needs. A couple of other things I wanted to just show. A question we got through the chat a few minutes ago was relating to the combined packing list and shipping label. And so via the chat, I had promised somebody I'd show at least an example or two of a combo packing list. And this is one that I just think is really pretty unique, because it's got a lot of information on it. So this was a combination packing slip that we did for Auto Trader. And essentially, Auto Trader's business was sending magazines to retail stores, convenience stores, drug stores, that sort of thing, and getting last month's magazines that were not sold back. So that their packing slip up here, the top of the form shows, here's what I'm shipping to you, and if as a customer of mine, you have magazines from the previous month that you want to send back to me, you can fill that out on this part of the form, and down below you'll notice 2 shipping labels. So on the left-hand side, this is the shipping label that I use to send the package out to the customer. But if they have magazines that are left over that need to come back to me, they can peel this return services label out, include this part of the packing slip, and send them back to me. And you'll even notice there's a barcode on the bottom of this return services label. So I track this information inside of NetSuite so that if this package shows up in my warehouse, I can scan that barcode and I can say, oh, this is the shipment from 7-Eleven on Park Avenue in Park City, Utah. So this to me was a very sort of complex example of what those packing lists can look like. But you could easily replace, like this bottom label on the right, maybe it's a gift card. You know, you're a gift company and you want to be able to include a gift message that says "Happy Birthday, Mom," or you know, something to that effect. These forms can be highly customized to kind of fit your specific business need. But I thought this was a good example. The other document I want to show you real quickly, because we talked about it a few minutes ago, was the idea of an ASN label. So, you know, a lot of you are familiar with a UPS label or a FedEx label or a postal label. But in that situation where I need to generate an ASN, out of my printer, I can get my UPS label that you see on the left side of the screen here, but I can also get that ASN label. So again, if you think about the staff in the warehouse, let's say I'm shipping to Dick's Sporting Goods. A UPS label comes out of the printer, and then my ASN label comes out of the printer right after it. I'm not reliant on anybody to make a decision. I'm not relying on a person to remember to print that Dick's Sporting Goods label. It happens for me automatically. And in this example, this was a label that we generated in conjunction with SPS Commerce from an EDI perspective. We know SPS maintains this format of the label, so I also don't need to worry about managing that label and the layout of the label. I know it's going to be compliant with my trading partner. So anybody talking about EDI and ASNs, I just wanted to show that example as well of kind of a real-world ASN or SSCC type label. And then I'll jump back over
and we're getting to the top of the hour, so we'll just finish up and just thinking about how some of these capabilities might help. Again, we've seen a number of familiar names, but maybe there's a new, starting to sell through a new channel, new e-commerce channel, or win a new customer that's kind of driving some complexity, or a new requirement in the warehouse that maybe is done manually and not as streamlined. Maybe some additional information you want to get back into NetSuite to provide that, to provide the better information to your customer service team, whether that's tracking information, the ASN we've talked about. Or are there any situations in the warehouse where you're doing things manually on an exception basis? A good sort of test is if there's some yellow stickies or notes on that ship station, that's probably an opportunity to apply some business rules or create an automated document coming out of the OzLINK shipping solution. And then finally, just your opportunity to do some optimization on different services and options based on to drive their cost savings. So I wanted to thank everyone because that'll bring our session to an end. I don't know if there's some additional questions we're going to address that we didn't get to, Troy?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions, two questions that are easy ones. One person asked, will the recording of this webinar be available? And we will post this online, so we'll send everybody the link. A couple of people have asked if we can get a copy of the presentation itself. So that's an easy one we can send out. Another question that had come up was related to batch processing. And can you support different carriers within a batch process? If so, can we sort by carrier? So I think what that means is I've got a group of orders and I want to batch ship them. Could I have some UPS shipments and some postal shipments in there? But when the output comes out of the printer, could it be configured so all my UPS labels are together and then all of my postal labels? I think it's kind of what that's asking, and certainly the answer is yes. That's something that we can provide. Another question, Brian, that had come up, we were talking about the ASN, and the question was, I need to capture serial numbers and bins. Can that be done as part of shipping or someplace earlier in my warehouse?
Yeah, and typically what we find is the better place to capture is that pick time, and our barcode scanning solution enables you to do that. Just eliminates the, you're doing it right at the point of the pick. So it reduces any errors, validates you're picking the right thing, captures that information. But they can be done sort of at the pack station as well, so to be able to capture that information. So there's a couple of options there.
One other point of clarification, somebody had asked, when we did the shipping demonstration, that looked like UPS WorldShip. Was it? If so, my warehouse manager is going to be very happy. And I probably should have made that point more clearly that, yeah, that the shipping integration, the generation of the shipping label, that was done through the UPS WorldShip software. So, you know, if your team is comfortable with WorldShip and kind of how it works and the scales and printers work with that, with OzLINK, we are going to leverage those carrier systems that the staff in the warehouse is pretty comfortable with. One more, Brian, it says, during the fulfillment stage, can I print a return services label so that I can get my outbound shipping label and return services label at the same time?
Yeah, and that can be done, you know, in general or also based on business rules. So maybe for particular orders, you're producing a return label with the outbound label. Other orders, you might be only producing the outbound label, but certainly that can be done.
Another question that had come in was, during the demonstration we used UPS. Can a similar process work with FedEx and the Postal Service? I see the icons on the toolbar. And the answer is absolutely. So FedEx is supported, the Postal Service, as Brian mentioned earlier, carriers like OnTrack, Purolator, you know, those types of carriers are also available. And the process is really very, very similar. Just from a timing standpoint, we just wanted to use one carrier to get started today. I think that might be it, Brian, that I see.
Well, good. Well, again, I thank everyone. I know you guys are busy. I appreciate the time. Hopefully it was informative for you. You can look. We do have a YouTube channel with a number of different videos, little sort of 2-minute videos of various solutions. So if you want to get a better feel for how the solutions work. And then also, if you have information, we have a specific microsite for NetSuite solutions. So you can go there. There's case studies, data sheets, customer examples. Also, the YouTube videos are available on that site as well. And then there's a LinkedIn group, which allows you to sort of get updates on new things as they come out. So just to sort of stay plugged in and also see other customers using the OzLINK solution network, those sort of things. And then you can also check out our listings on Suite app where customers have provided their recommendations. So again, I appreciate everyone's time. As Troy mentioned, we will send out a recording and the slides, a link to everyone who's registered and attended today. Thanks very much.